Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to our webinar on driving innovative 5G monetization and user engagement. I'm Phil Layla. I'm the Director of Consulting at STL Partners, and I'm joined by my colleague Darius Singh and by Ron Porter from Amdocs. And let's just, before we dive into today's session, just take a little bit through, if you're not familiar with the GoToWebinar menu, you'll see on your box, you've got a little control panel. You're all in listen-only mode. And if you want some help, you're not hearing the audio, you've got a problem, technical problem, please type in a comment and one of our technical program. So as I mentioned, myself, Darius and Ron, what we're going to be covering today is a little bit, what is the new Telco Vision that is associated with 5G? And we're going to ask you to participate in a poll on the question, so get ready to respond to that. Based on that, we're going to explore some of the key capabilities that we think are required in order to not just to deliver innovative user engagement and innovative services, but also importantly monetize them. And that's what a lot of what we're going to be focusing today is about. And Darius is going to take us through that vision. He's going to take us through how we see the key capabilities for delivering the vision. And he's going to introduce a kind of a new billing paradigm, which Ron is going to pick up and take us through. And at the end of that, we're going to invite you to contribute your questions and address them at that Q&A session. Right, so I did say we were going to do a poll. I think we're going to try and do that now. We're going to ask you in a moment to respond based on your perspective, either an operator you know well or your own operator, if you're dialing from an operator. And we're just going to ask you straight up, where do you see the biggest 5G opportunity? And it's pretty obvious is the four options that we started here. So we're just going to fire up that poll now and ask you in a few seconds to respond. So pretty easy, just click on which of these four you think represents the biggest 5G opportunity for telcos. Do you see that as significant improvements in the connectivity, and therefore the growth will be from that improved connectivity to consumers, to enterprises? Do you see it as actually enabling a whole bunch of new services and therefore driving growth as an opportunity from them, or do you see it as new services to enterprises? Give you another 5 seconds and let's see what the poll says. So, okay, oops, that was very brief. There we go. So those of you who are very quick will have spotted that, interestingly, there is a skew towards new, and I'm not that surprised. Personally, that's what I'd have done. But there's some pretty good spread here. There's some who do believe that actually it's the improved connectivity to consumers in itself represents it. So an interesting mix. We'll come back to this poll later on, and we'll also invite the speakers to share their views on that. So it's now my pleasure to invite Darius to take us through his presentation. What Darius is going to do is share some findings from a current research program that's still underway and some previous research we've undertaken earlier in the year. So Darius, over to you.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks a lot, Phil. And yeah, very interesting to see the results from that poll. And I think it ties in quite nicely with the vision that I'm going to talk about here, and that move, primarily towards new services across consumer, but also new services, the software, the platform, and the network focused on that enterprise segment as well. And I guess for anyone who's been following STL Partners for a while now will have heard us talk a lot about the coordination age vision and this idea of a new age of telecommunications that is providing telecoms operators a new growth opportunity. And as Phil mentioned, 5G is one part of that and one driver of that, but it is a wider industry change that's leading to this new telco vision, and away, I think, from this legacy view that you can see on the slide now of serving traditional voice and connectivity in a horizontal way to multiple industries, whether that is consumer, industry 4.0, healthcare, and moving towards this future vision of new services to enterprises and what we're calling a more vertical play. So we get this idea of a future operator who's still delivering core connectivity products, but in new models and new cloud-like ways. So we talk about network as a service and cloud native networks, dynamic and flexible networks that come with 5G and slicing and all of that technology and those capabilities, and still delivering those network capabilities to a host of industry verticals, again, whether that is consumer or healthcare or industry 4.0 or agriculture. But the idea is we're moving towards a new model of service delivery in that networking slice. But also, as the poll shows, this idea of moving further up the value chain and delivering new services beyond network as a service. And so we get to this platform layer, whether that is a data management capability, it may be more around security and authentication. But the idea is you become slightly more specialized and you deliver a higher value platform that on top of the network to a smaller subgroup of enterprises. And you may still be doing that to multiple segments. So here we've got the idea of healthcare as well as financial services, for example, and KPN is a good example where they have their data services hub that it's leveraged both in the healthcare space as well as for use cases in connected traffic infrastructure. So leveraging that same platform and the capabilities and the skills, but across a number of different enterprises, just slightly more focused than you would with the network traditionally. And then moving one layer up to the SaaS and the application space. And if you are playing in the consumer space that we have pointed here, maybe content, AR, VR, gaming, that sort of thing. But the idea is you move again, one step up the value chain and start to acquire some of the opportunities that are held there, but becoming slightly more specialized and more verticalized and offering these services to a smaller segment of your potential customer base. And one of the reasons that you need to do that and become more specialized is because the vertical play requires investment in a whole load of new capabilities, a new partner ecosystem, new infrastructure, new skills. And that takes time, that takes commitment, it takes resource. And so for operators who do share this vision and want to move further up that value chain, they need to consider becoming more targeted and more verticalized so that they can actually realize that vision and build those capabilities. And that's kind of what we want to dive into a little bit more today. So how do you actually achieve that vision, that new services vision of moving higher up the value chain? Well, we see there are kind of 4 building blocks or 4 foundations to that vision and actually monetizing that vision. And those we've kind of spread across the services, of course, the network component, the technology component, the IT infrastructure and the BSS, and the organization, so the skills, the structure, the expertise. And what we see in that legacy telco view that I was presenting before is that the service is really the network. The network is the core service that you're delivering, and that's facing declining ARPUs. And on the network, where we're stuck in those legacy architectures, we maybe have limited virtualization and single vendors who are providing the majority of that network. In IT BSS, we're stuck within some more simple procurement models like subscription. Things are manual in terms of delivering insights to customers and partners, and in terms of delivering potentially new products and services. And within the organization, there is the perception that telcos are traditionally slow and bureaucratic. It's difficult to share skills, it's difficult to share expertise because things are siloed, and we're looking internally and very much trying to build telco skills rather than looking outside and externally to acquire and keep new talent, whether that's data management or somewhere else. And we want to paint this vision of what a telco needs to do in this new telco vision to actually create the idea that the network is the platform, and we're adding value-added services and applications on top of the network and becoming more verticalized. So, within the network, we look at new architectures that 5G brings, like distributed compute and virtual machines in telco cloud and slicing. We move towards a more cloud native, multiple vendor ecosystem, and that cloud native mindset fits across the organization as well as we look more DevOps, more agile. We're building skills in AI and automation. We're trying to breed a culture of R&D and potentially shifting away from pure network CapEx to R&D OpEx. And all of these together, we've got to consider them and think about the IT BSS side as well, and there's more complex models that are coming, that are arising from a wider portfolio of services that operators can offer, and moving towards different channels for selling, moving towards more flexible channels for selling, and moving towards this idea of automation and real-time services and insights. And so we kind of see this vision as being built by these 4 foundations, and telcos needing to assess the opportunity and understand the strategy that they have across those 4 building blocks to look at monetization for 5G and next-gen services in a more holistic way. And we kind of wanted to ask the question, where are CSPs on this journey to date? And the proxy that we wanted to use, or what we're going to show today, is we asked enterprises, and we did a survey to 700 enterprises globally. And we asked them, in an ideal world, quite frankly, what do you see as the role of the CSP? Now, we had a range of options from connectivity only all the way through to that end-to-end solution. And quite promisingly, what we found was that if we grey out that connectivity only slice, that 90% of respondents do think that operators should be doing more than connectivity alone, which is really promising. And a big part of that does come within that orange box there, the managed services. And here, that wasn't just maintenance, that wasn't just support, but actually taking on a role of optimization for that service, becoming more of a strategic advisor. So actually not just traditional managed services, but actually taking a stronger advisor role with your customers. And to be honest, even if we take that box out, so again, we gray that out and just leave the colored ones here, almost 50% still feel that there is scope for operators at this point in time to be playing a higher value role, potentially in that application enablement space, the red chunk here, or in that application and SaaS and services space in the dark gray. So, there's still a lot of enterprises who feel operators should and could be doing more across different industry verticals. And if we dive again into that 16%, to be honest, it's not a huge segment of the market, but it's not insignificant. And again, I think it shows there is scope for CSPs to do this, but it's not massive and it's not the biggest proportion. And if telcos want to make that investment that I mentioned in moving into a verticalized strategy and building the credibility, you may need that piece of pie to be slightly bigger, because that is where a lot of the value lies and where a lot of the share of the wallet is. And so our key recommendation from this research program was really thinking around CSPs needing to invest to build that credibility with enterprise customers, because if you do want to move around that wheel and move into the verticalized opportunities and take on a higher value role, you need to invest to build the skills, build the capabilities, and build that credibility. And that credibility and those capabilities don't just stop at the network, where there is obviously a lot of investment in 5G and edge, and doesn't just stop at the product and the proposition in terms of the services. But as we want to talk about for the rest of this webinar, we want to talk about the infrastructure side and the ITBSS side, where you need to consider that as a fundamental foundation to being 5G ready. And one of the operators that we spoke to as part of this ongoing research program put it in quite an interesting analogy of playing tennis, where if you're a professional tennis player and Babolat or Head were releasing a new racket, you wouldn't wait to get that new racket to train and to practice your serve and to get your fitness levels up. You'd be going out and getting on the court with the racket that you had until that racket came out, so that when you do have that racket, you can actually play great tennis. And I like that analogy because it's taking a holistic view and not just saying it's the equipment that we need to get right, but actually the back-end processes and the fundamentals that we need to sort out. And so we want to dive into that a little bit more for the rest of this webinar. And so I'm talking about this new vision and the new vision for BSS and IT, and I wanted to dive into what that really means, or some of the complexities that are within the demands on that ITBSS in this new vision for telcos and in this new 5G world. And we started to kind of call it the new billing paradigm. And what we can see for bullet number 1, and I'll kind of summarize each one that I want to talk about and then go into it in slightly more detail in the following slides. But the idea here is the convergence of legacy models and traditional models, coupled with the new emerging, more flexible, more cloud-like procurement models. And I guess the hybrid nature of that and how telcos are going to manage that from the process and the BSS side. The second point that I want to talk about is, again, in that digital, it's still talking about hybrid, but from a channels perspective. So the balancing the offline with the more digital, and balancing traditional consultative with more self-service options, and how that looks across the partner, how that looks across the end customer. And the third point I want to look at, which ties across both of the previous two, is as we move towards this new telco vision and moving higher up the value chain, you grow your portfolio of services and you grow the different bundles and combinations of services that you can offer. So how do you address simplifying that portfolio so you're hiding some of that complexity, but also enabling choice and flexibility for your customers, for your partners, and for yourself to create new products and create new configurations and be slightly more bespoke, but in an automated way without having to do that manually. So I guess addressing the dichotomy of simplifying an ever increasingly complex portfolio while still enabling a true level of choice and flexibility and configurability. So those are the 3 points that I really want to talk about again and dive into in terms of this new billing paradigm and how we're thinking about monetizing 5G from a holistic perspective. So starting with the first one, the idea of convergence of legacy and new models. What we talk about and what we see are these more traditional models for service and application and connectivity procurement in enterprise and in consumer, where they may be more capex intensive. So I'm purchasing all up front, I'm paying for hardware and maybe having some level of license, which is ongoing OpEx. But what I'm procuring from the telecoms provider is probably limited. It may be just in that scope of connectivity, and there's a limited number of different product types from the telco that I'm actually purchasing. What we're seeing generally is an industry shift with people like AWS and Azure driving this, the shift towards more cloud-like models and OpEx-intensive models that are consumption-based, very flexible, and in that new vision, that telco vision, the move towards a portfolio of services from the operator that may span across those different models. So it's not that every service that an enterprise is going to purchase now will be highly flexible and OpEx intensive. They still may want some of those models to be traditional, and they may want other services like the application to be more consumption based, but the device they may want rated in a slightly different way. And so you end up with this hybrid environment of enterprises procuring different solutions from different vendors, whether that's the telco or not, that all have different models associated with them. But interestingly, what we found was, even though this is an industry-wide and a general shift, if we take a static snapshot at the moment, 62% of the enterprises that we surveyed for next generation solutions favored those traditional models, so that paying up front, that high capex, or that paying for the hardware and having the software that was OpEx, over those pure cloud-like consumption-based models and those flexible models. And so, what I wanted to talk about here and pause here for a moment was saying that even though it's an industry-wide shift, it is a migration and it's a steady migration. And telcos are going to have to be able to manage customers and enterprises that are slightly more traditional versus those that want true flexibility and consumption-based versus the spectrum of all that are in between. And that spreads not just from the customers that you're dealing with, but the partners. And as we grow that partner ecosystem to deliver 5G services and new applications which will leverage 5G, you need to be able to manage how partners may bill and rate and charge for that as well, and the complexity of the hybrid environment there. So being able to manage that transition becomes very important. And in the second half of this slide, what I wanted to talk about was the idea of true flexibility, because interestingly, what we found in another research program, which was focused on private networking, was that 60% of respondents who wanted a flexible leasing model to procure a private network would actually pay 20% more for a lease that they could cancel at any time versus one that had a lengthy contract. And I think the standard that we used was 2 years. So this is getting to the idea that what enterprises don't want is to be locked in for a long-term contract, even if it is OpEx and it is flexible or consumption-based. They don't want to have that service from you as a vendor for a long period of time. They want to avoid that vendor lock-in. And so even if it is OpEx, that doesn't mean X as a service. That is not true cloud native. That is not true flexibility. And CSPs need to be aware of that and need to be able to offer a range of payment options that include longer term contracts and more fixed fees, as well as those cancel anytime, cloud native, spin up, spin down services. And they need a front end service that can offer that, and the propositions and the marketing around that. But also, as I'll keep coming back to, they need the back-end processes that will enable that, and they need a robust enough BSS system that will enable that. And whether that is a transform your BSS overhaul, or whether it is start to look at more microservices and patches, we'll come on to in a moment as well. But essentially, this to address this hybrid environment needing to transform parts of the BSS. The second bullet that I wanted to dive into, as I mentioned, was the increasing prevalence of digital and hybrid channels, as well as the self-service. So starting on the enterprise space, again, where we surveyed those 700 enterprises globally, we asked them for next generation services and solutions and 5G enabled services and solutions. How would you actually look to procure these services? Would it be through digital channels? Would it be through hybrid channels? A mix of consultative and digital, or would it be, all consultative where I have a sales agent who takes me through that process? And what you can see from this pie chart is that 90% of enterprises want some form of digital channel. So if you aggregate the blue piece here, whereas 40% want digital only, and the 50% that wanted some level of digital and consultative hybrid, that's equivalent to 90% wanting a digital channel. And that is a staggering amount, and it was more than I was necessarily expecting in the enterprise space. And I think it really shows that enterprises are advancing down this route and do want to move towards more self-service and digital and away from a traditional consultative SI sales approach. And we looked into this based on region, based on different industries, and it didn't vary too much. Where it did vary, and there was a trend, was on size of enterprise. And again, maybe surprisingly, we felt SMEs would be more open to digital models, but actually the SMEs were more reliant slightly on the consultative model and actually preferred that heavier touch, that face-to-face, I think, to support them through the process. Whereas larger, more tech mature enterprises felt that, well, what we feel is because they have larger IT teams with skills and resource, they can be slightly more DIY, and that lends itself more towards a digital model because they have IT teams that can configure and want to configure their own services and be best of breed across these different suites of services and stitch their own services together. So we end up with this slightly more digital and DIY model in larger, more tech mature enterprises. And whether that is through a digital portal or whether that is leveraging open APIs, that's for the market to advance and probably where we're heading. But I think the idea is that we need to give, and telcos need to give enterprises in this next generation services and solutions the opportunity to construct their own and to do this through digital channels. And we looked at this also from the consumer side, and this is a piece of research that we did direct to telecoms operators. So we surveyed digital execs, so heads of digital, chiefs of digital, and we asked them about their organization's digital strategy. And hopefully what you can see from the pie chart is that 82%, the overwhelming majority of operators are pursuing a omni-channel strategy, a hybrid strategy that we've called here. And even though they're investing heavily in digital, that is still part of that omni-channel to drive customer experience and enable consumers to move seamlessly from online to offline channels at each stage of the journey. And that takes not just a very strong capability in the front end to be able to do that and strong marketing to be able to do that. But again, the CRM systems need to be robust, and you need to have standardization there, and you need to have a back-end system that can enable data sharing across those channels, as well as the idea of being able to procure services across those channels as well. And what we found when we actually surveyed direct to the consumers as part of this research program was that in more tech mature environments, consumers do favor having choice and flexibility in their bundles and often wanted the functionality to build their own packages and to have complete control over the package that they're offered and the price that they're offered by the telecoms operator. And a couple of examples, I suppose, from recent telcos and from the interview program, one North American operator was talking about their pay TV model and how they were going to use that model throughout now their 5G story for consumer and potentially into the enterprise space, where we have channels that you can add and you can be very flexible about that, but there are still packages of sports or packages of movies, but you can tweak and tailor those from that base as much as you want, and that level of flexibility is what they're kind of aiming for throughout the stack. And to use an example from an operator in Europe, within their youth segment, they have the opportunity where you say I'm going to pay whatever it is, 20 euros a month. You can allocate a certain number of points to building your bundle, which may span across TV, movies, data packages, other services, security, but also as we move into new services for the consumer in a 5G world, gaming and AR, VR, etc. So being able to allocate points to build and create your own bundles becomes very important. And again, the idea of doing that through digital rather than having to call up an agent to do that and being able to handle that without needing an assisted journey drives customer experience and drives cost benefits for you as the CSP. And I guess that idea of configurability and being able to build your own bundles as a consumer and an enterprise leads me on to point number 3, which is as CSPs move further up the value chain, they have a much richer portfolio of bundles and products they can offer, but they need to be able to simplify those so that people can actually engage and ingest while also enabling that level of choice and flexibility. And what I've done here is double click on that pie chart from the previous slide and look at the 50% of enterprises that wanted a hybrid model. So the 50% that wanted a hybrid model, we asked them, which stage of the customer journey would you prefer to do digitally? And I wanted to call out the configuration piece here, which I've highlighted in red, because as you can see, 63% of enterprises who wanted a hybrid model want to be able to configure that service digitally. So telcos need to be able to offer them, different suites and tiers and bundles of products, but enable them to actually configure and we can tailor that service for themselves. And that is very complex for an enterprise. And as we grow that portfolio, it becomes very complex, but it is something that telcos seemingly need to do, but while simplifying that portfolio and the pricing structure and the messaging around it. And to kind of, I guess, add more complexity to that bullet, it's not just the configuration of the end customer point of view, but partners and value-added resellers may also want to be able to configure new services from the telco and from the partner ecosystem, as well as and what we heard from a recent interview program as well. Telcos may want to be able to reconfigure those services, and as they add new partners in and as they learn more about their customers, be able to very quickly create new services and new products and bundles from across those different partners who, again, going back to point number one, may all have slightly different models for procurement and slightly different models for rating and billing and charging. So telcos needing to be able to have a BSS system that is robust and flexible enough to handle those changes to effectively create a good user experience for enterprises and consumers who are purchasing 5G services. And that sort of leads me on to the second point here, and the quotes, which I've colored in orange and gold, because you would expect the quoting part of this process to be relatively simple, and for enterprises who want to evaluate and configure their service digitally to also want to receive a quote digitally. So why is it that there's quite a steep drop off from 63% to 42% in that stage of the journey? And I think that comes down to a lack of trust in digital capabilities to actually provide them with a quote. And there's this issue of price parity where, especially in the consumer market, there's this notion that if I call up, I'll get a better deal. So telcos need to invest in capabilities and messaging that shows customers that actually what we're providing you here, the quote that we're providing you here is the best deal, but also invest in capabilities that can create a real-time quote. Because if you can't actually configure the service real-time, you probably need to call up to say, well, this is the bundle I want, how much is that going to charge me? And someone manually has to go through and do a lookup table and actually find what different prices and combinations and create the deal. So having a BSS and billing capability that will enable what we call CPQ, configure price quote, will be extremely important in driving this move towards digital models, hybrid models, and self-service. So we wanted to just quickly run another poll, and I guess we wanted to dive into those three challenges that I've just painted and hear from you in terms of where you think the biggest challenge for telcos lies across those challenges. Or we've given the option of other. If you do want to tick that, please do, and do write in the questions or the comments box with other challenges that you see on that IT, that foundational BSS side. And so if we launch that poll now, hopefully you should be able to see it on your screens. So again, just to quickly run through those options. Number one, that converged legacy model versus the new, more flexible cloud-like models across customers and partners, and the telco being able to integrate that across those customers and those partners and create a seamless experience. Number two, the hybrid channels, both digital and offline, and the self-service that comes with that and managing that complexity. And number three is how you manage a growing portfolio in complexity with simplification while also enabling choice. So we'll give a couple more seconds to get some more votes in, and hopefully we'll start to see a bit of a spread, or we may even see convergence on one option. So we'll give a couple more seconds before we close that poll. Okay, brilliant. So I think we've got the majority there, and hopefully you can see the results. So almost evenly split between number one and number three, which do seem like heavy areas that telcos are investing now, and from the program that we're running at the moment was addressed by many operators as a key challenge, especially when we bring in that notion of working with the partners and how across that ecosystem, which may be charging in different ways, we create a seamless experience. And so starting to see some ideas that the BSS really needs to address that convergence and that hybrid environment of the bill and the procurement models, while also enabling flexibility and choice. So what I want to do now before I hand over to Ron is quickly just run through a couple of capabilities that we see from that interview program that we're running at the moment as kind of key. And I'll go through them relatively quickly because I have touched on them a little bit throughout the presentation. But the first one is that configure price quote, that automated service configuration and purchasing. So the ability of customers to create their own bundles and create their own services and products across your portfolio, as well as the options for partners to do that, but also the ability for you as the telco to do that very quickly and be fast to market when you know that you want to create a new bundle with a new ecosystem of partners, be able to have a BSS system that can handle that across those different models for delivery. And the second one here is hybrid billing. So again, when we do have those partners and all those different elements of a solution, an end-to-end solution being delivered in different ways, being able to manage that both from a legacy and traditional connectivity standpoint, but also the new services and applications and cloud-like SaaS consumption. And we do feel like those two kind of high-level use cases lead to more value-added services. For example, real-time bill presentment can be a real addition to the telco stickiness and the stickiness of the proposition, because if I as an enterprise can go on and in real time see across that end-to-end solution, how much I'm expecting to pay and combat some of that unpredictability of consumption models, as well as understand across my cost centers where my big cost buckets are, that's a real value to me. There's a level of customer analytics as well. So across CPQ, understanding what customers want from those products so that you as the telco can create a more refined bundle and the wrappers around that, as well as within the bill, understand where a customer's not using services they've paid for, so that you can identify a consultative approach and support them through that journey, but also identify services that they may want more of and get a cross or upsell opportunity through that customer analytics. That supports with the partner management as well. And this is a real sticking point that we've heard for telcos and partners, where getting customer data records and sharing how customers are actually leveraging those services is very manual and has to be done in batch processing and is extremely tedious. So if partners had portals where they could log on and configure those services, but also understand more about their own customer base from the telco perspective, that will be extremely valuable and create a sticky proposition to them. And of course, this move towards automation and move towards digital creates an idea of zero-touch management. So not needing to have assisted journeys and creating efficiencies with that regards. And just quite quickly, we've had a go at thinking about some of the benefits there to the telco bottom lines and how it impacts to customers in a stickier proposition, reducing churn of both direct and indirect customers because you've got that partner piece, acquiring new customers because you've got services that and you can put out services and messaging that enterprises and consumers want to leverage and want to buy. You can impact revenues, therefore, in terms of ARPU, but also increase cross and upsell potential, and impact key cost metrics like the customer and partner experience management costs, as well as cost of acquisition and retention. And again, because you can understand more about the bundles and services that customers want, you can innovate and create those products and develop those products faster and with a reduced cost. So, we see this as having impacts across the board and enabling you to successfully and effectively monetize new services and applications and new partner ecosystems. And with that, I will hand over to Ron, who will dive into this idea of the new billing paradigm and monetizing in a 5G era in more detail.
Thanks a lot, Darius. Really interesting insights. I really wanted to give our perspective at Amdocs, and maybe starting, I'm kind of going back to where you started. Starting when you're talking about monetization in the 5G era, so much of that starts with the wider arc we have here of the diversification of service providers. Traditionally, they focused on connectivity or expanding to triple play or quad play for consumers or various connectivity services for enterprises. And now they're looking to expand to a whole new world of new services and new options. Be it in media, they're already well in there, but looking to further enhance that. Gaming, VR, AR, different connected spaces, and new business models. So Again, much of this potential of 5G, the dynamic 5G network, the programmable network, is the service provider will be in a stronger position to deliver these services. He's not just going to be the dumb pipe, the connectivity provider like until now, but being able to give tailored connectivity parameters for whatever application, right? Be it low latency for gaming or edge resources for AR, VR, or the density for IoT. And again, if it be it directly to consumers or to enterprises or as an ecosystem enabler. But in the smaller arc we have here, we're talking about the billing journey or the new billing paradigm we're talking about, where the end of month bill that we service providers are used to interact with customers and to get the payments, that doesn't fit this new model, right? So the whole model of these services is much more dynamic, and customers are going to expect to pay for these new services in new ways with different models, not just at the end of the month. It might involve different subscriptions and one-time payments and additional payment methods, and the transparency and all of those other things you mentioned. So this is kind of the background. And if we move into the next slide, we're looking to our approach into this new billing paradigm really revolves around a solution that we call real-time billing. And real-time billing is all about this shift. So if on the top we see this traditional end of cycle billing where, right, all of the charges, everything is calculated on bill. It's aggregated and registered and calculated to whoever bought the SME. And again, this was fine in the kind of smaller scope of services we had until today. But once again, as we move forward, we move to this approach of the need for a real-time billing to support different methods of payments. So it can be additional subscriptions, and some of these might not be aligned with the cycle of the service provider, right? If I added this through my service provider, I added a subscription to a cloud gaming provider or to some media provider or some partner at the middle of the month, I want this seamless experience, and this can happen if it's calculated in real time. Or one-time charges, I might buy some add-on package to my kid in his gaming experience, or some top-up, again, as we move further into the 5G era, 5G booster plan. And again, it's one-time charge. I might want to pay with it off bill or with an alternative credit card, with an e-payment system. All of these things are not enabled in today's billing paradigm. We put here offer changes. And again, there's many different scenarios. The point is that when we calculate these events and bill for them as they happen, on the one hand, we're enabling a real-time, very accurate spend view, which is always current. Whatever method, however you choose to pay with it, it will be very transparently and simply projected to you. Again, and you can be a consumer or an enterprise or a partner. And on the other hand, from the service provider's perspective, it results in a much lower workload at the end of the month cycle. You get a much more simplified experience for the service provider. And if we move to the next slide, we'll see some of the, how we look at all of these benefits going into this one place of our, real-time billing engine. So the one hand is what we call 360 monetization, and right, B2C is the traditional, but again, B2C, we're going to have more and more services going to consumers. On the other hand, the B2B services that we do have, which are much more focused on connectivity, and Darius talked quite a bit about that, they're going to be dramatically enhanced with things like network as a service and slices and private enterprise network and maybe edge resources. And on top of that, we have the B2B2X, where we have partners that want to leverage our 5G network in the way they require. So once again, we need some sort of engine that can aggregate and have a one place to charge and bill for all of these different monetization models. On the left, we're discussing the hybrid billing concept, and this means to the fact that we are moving into this real-time billing mode of operations, but we still have the end of cycle billing. And this is, I think, is an important point. Nobody expects the way we're working now to just be flown out the window. No, we're going to still have the existing services, the existing mode of operations, but we want to start to introduce additional possibilities and additional options, things like, and we mentioned the subscriptions and the one-time. So once again, having this overlaying real-time billing engine really enables us to address all of these in a very hybrid manner. On the right, we mentioned the The new monetization models, again, the network as a service and the slice and edge, and we might have location-based offers or time-based offers or IoT, right? Things of locations that are only available at the stadium for the time of the game, and you buy a package for 2 hours. And again, this can be directly to consumer or through a partner, might be a subscription if you bought a package of games. All of these different monetization interactions need to be billed and charge for and billed to the end customer and to the partner in new ways that are not currently supported. And quite important on the bottom, we put the cloud angle, right? Everybody, of course, is looking. There's a lot of drive in the telecom industry to move to the public cloud. There's a lot of benefits there in terms of reduced costs and operational, but most of these systems today are still on premise. So operators want to find this kind of, once again, hybrid approach, how to get the best of both worlds. How do I move and migrate to the public cloud, still leveraging my on-premise assets? Maybe I can't move everything to the public cloud because of regulation, or maybe I just have enough, huge data centers I want to keep leveraged then. So again, not going full on to the public cloud, it's an option, but it doesn't fit for anyone. So once again, this hybrid approach comes into play, and this is another thing that can only be maintained by a solution that is fully cloud native and microservices based and can come as the appropriate overlay, and you can place the appropriate model at the ideal place. And in the last slide, we kind of try to map out the benefits, and I kind of try to group them in different families of this new real-time billing approach. So of course, customer satisfaction, and once again, I keep saying it, it's both the customer can be a consumer, it can be an enterprise, and can be my partner in the middle. They're going to gain this transparent real-time view. It can be very personalized to them. If we're talking about consumers, we can leverage this real-time elements and multiple information from different BSS systems to create targeted messaging to my customers to make the bill more clear and simple to them. Give them the options to pay in any payment means they want, right? Maybe they want to pay in e-payment systems in Apple Pay, or in maybe even e-currencies in the future. And this ties in very closely to the financial bottom line, which we have on the bottom. The fact that you're going to get a transparent and clear bill, which, in real time, this really means that, the customer will be more relaxed. He won't be concerned of what is this new expense that I have? Why is my bill now higher? Like, we used to know these types of things from just roaming surprises customers got. And of course, this resulted in churn and in calls to care. So if I want to encourage my customers to consume more service from me, the service providers, I want to be very clear for them and preemptively notify them, look, you bought this booster package for your gaming to your son. This is why your bill is higher. Maybe even offer an upsell package. We have a discount for next month's a new cloud game, etc., etc. And of course, reducing fraud and leakage from the fact that all of these bills and all this calculations happens in real time. I'm not waiting till the end of the month to start to figure out, maybe somebody is getting a service he didn't pay for, or even worse, maybe somebody is trying to bypass the system. And on the right, we talked about ongoing operations. So again, this is very important to service providers. The faster time to cash, especially if we're talking about one-time payments, and the fact you can recognize this cash as it happens, right? I don't have to wait up to a full month for the end of the cycle to really recognize this revenue from a financial perspective. I have a very accurate financial outlook. Again, the service providers, because the bills were calculated in real time, including the taxes and discounts and prorations and changes, all of that was calculated and is exactly accurate. And this also contributes to the QA, the quality of assurance. I don't start to calculate at the end of the month what went wrong and where are the mistakes, and then maybe starting to notify customers maybe even after I sent them the bill. Again, this ties into the transparency and the real time. And I think the most important is the bottom right, and this is where we are finishing, the streamlined evolution. And we mentioned this before, we have the traditional business models and how we engage with customers, but we want to support the new business models, the B2B to X, partnership models, the ecosystem, supporting IoT solution, private enterprise network as a service. We want to be able to migrate that. We want to consolidate, to modernize our legacy, our traditional systems that we have, leveraging what we have in the optimal way, reducing total cost of ownership, and being able to have this modular approach. So once again, we're looking for some kind of overlay system to leverage what we have not necessarily throw it all out the window and completely modernize, but have a tailored approach to modernization. And this also ties into what we discussed about the cloud, being able to leverage and balance the public and private cloud, maybe even introducing some SaaS models into there as is needed. So once again, for all of this, we need this hybrid, this new hybrid billing paradigm, which is powered by the real-time billing engine. So I think with that, we covered quite extensively what we wanted to discuss, and we did want to leave some times for questions. So I'm going to hand it back over to you, Phil.
Thank you very much, Ron. And yes, we do have a few questions. So I'd like to, in the remaining 30 minutes, try and get through some of those. I'm going to start with one for you, Ron, here. A question. We see very little new revenue from 5G today. So, where do you see the real drive for this transition that you're mentioning? Where's the evidence?
So, I mean, it's true. Everyone's kind of looking around. What is the 5G killer app? How are you going to make money from there? And what we keep saying, I think, we are not at the end state of 5G, right? Today, 5G is still non-standalone. The major currency today is faster speeds. And this ties into the Darius example, the quote he wrote about the tennis racket. I don't think it's so much as waiting for the new tennis racket, but as you're still playing in the field and the game is going to change, right? You want to start playing already with the new racket, even as the game is evolving, right? And if we're seeing operators already today in 5G non-standalone launching, cloud gaming offers, already there, they're starting to involve things like different new subscription models, new one-time payments. Sometimes they are going to give you a subscription to a VR app, but they're only going to fund it for 6 months, and after that, the customer has to start paying again through the service provider. So these are the first steps where service providers are starting to experiment with this new billing paradigm in order to be ready for the next step, which will be much more complex models and opening up to the partner ecosystem. So I think, we are seeing the leading operators already taking the first steps in that direction. And by the way, this is true across the board for the systems. They're doing the same with the network, with the OSS systems for orchestration. They're doing the same across for the charging policy, right? So the service providers realizes they won't be able to transform everything in a day. So they have to start doing this evolutionary process. So the same thing relates to the hybrid billing that we are discussing here.
Great, thank you for that, Ron. I've got a question I'm going to actually fire to you, Darius. This is a question. Oops, got to find it now. This was a question from Greg here. The question is, what operator shares this vision? So you set out a vision here, Darius, from your conversations. You may not be able to divulge the identity, but is this vision something that operators share?
Yeah, I mean, if I take a step back and think from that new telco services vision, so park the BSS side for now, that idea of becoming more verticalized and moving further up the stack, I think there are a number of operators that share that vision and are trying to carve out a role beyond connectivity. And Telus is a great example where they are one of the major players in healthcare in Canada. And they have invested over the past decade, the best part of the decade, in building that capability, and are now accounting for a major part of the healthcare provision in the Canadian market. And other examples, I guess, from healthcare, I'm going to wear my digital health practice lead hat, but KPN have moved very successfully into the application space within healthcare. BT have a strong ambition to move further up that value chain and play beyond connectivity in healthcare. But we also see others in other areas. And again, TELUS in agriculture have made acquisitions. There are a number of telcos that play a role in financial services, Singtel in mobile advertising. SK Telecom have really taken a role in AR, VR and gaming and in that regards. And even again, to take the healthcare view, have spun out their own company, which was headed up by one of the CEO of that now was a technology strategist within SKT. So I think there are a number of operators who are trying to invest and build credibility and capabilities to move up that value chain and play in that SaaS and PaaS role. I think in terms of other telcos that share that vision of the four foundations and needing to bring them all along and take a holistic view, I can speak to the research program that we're running at the moment, and And from, I'd say, the 4 or 5 that we did this week, the majority do see it as a holistic transformation and understand that they need to bring all of this together and have an organizational structure which has, the heads of IT and the heads of technology strategy sitting at the same table within the same business unit to actually drive this change. And so, it may be an enterprise architecture unit which consumes IT and technology, and those two work together in tandem to actually progress this along in a very agile and flexible way. So I do think there are telcos globally across multiple regions that share this vision and are trying to achieve it. I think there is still a long way to go for a lot of operators. So I wouldn't at all say we're there. I think it is a future vision, but I think operators do resonate with this narrative.
Thank you. I'm just going to fire another question to Ron. This is a question from Stephen, and Stephen's asking, do you see upgrades to OSS/BSS by MNOs as something that is or will hold back potentially the launch of new B2B and B2C services?
So again, I would put it this way: operators who if sit back and don't see any need to touch any of these systems, obviously will hold them back. Now, once again, it ties into what I just mentioned before. It's not that you have today to transform everything and throw everything away, but you have to start on this evolutionary process. We often compare the process that happened to the public cloud, right? So the public cloud didn't start with the huge ecosystem it is today. It started out with a basic server in the cloud, just buying storage. And over time, more and more services were added and APIs were opened and new ways to interact and bill and pay for different things that you buy them, right? If you think of AWS and how you can have a subscription to Amazon Prime, and you can you can have AWS have servers that are paid per use, or you can do spot prices. This is on B2B models. And if you look at Amazon and Amazon Prime for the consumer segment, they have the Amazon Prime, which is subscription and one-time payments, and they have a media plan. So over time, they kept evolving new ways to bill and interact with customers. And again, this does require evolution in the systems. The good news is that once operators have started to move away from the monolithic systems to more cloud-native systems, microservices based, they are gained the capabilities to do this modular approach and transformation, right? It doesn't have to be the whole huge transformation which the industry has learned to dread. But to think, if a few years ago you would maybe talk to operators and they would say, even with regards to charging, you don't need online charging to count data, everything's unlimited, and the billing is too complex today, just do a simple subscription. Why don't you just go with the Netflix model? Pay the subscription, it's very simple and clear. And Netflix is simple because they just have 3 tiers of products. So it's easy, it's simple, it's transparent. That's what you want to aim for, that user experience and payment experience. But at the same time, service providers want to be able to move into new types of applications and verticals. Most of them don't want to stay in the connectivity. And again, there's a big breadth of places you can go in the value chain, but most of them don't want to stay at the very bottom. They want to be as high as they can in this ecosystem.
No, thanks for that, Ron. I've got a couple of questions here I'm going to combine for you, Darius. There's a question here from Andreas, and there's a question here from Gerhard, and they're similar kind of questions. They're kind of asking you, where do you see, and this is Andreas's question, but it's similar to Gerhard's, where do you see quick wins for operators to help drive the development and investment for these 5G ecosystems, gaming, education? So, where's the low-hanging fruit? Where's the quick win?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question, and I think what people often forget about this 5G story is that it's not all about delivering totally new applications. A lot of this is, as we talked about, the new models for delivery, but also that actually enterprises have existing applications that need to be somewhat supercharged. And so you can deliver existing solutions that you can on 4G or Wi-Fi, but in a 5G way and in a different model. And I think those are going to be the quicker wins for telcos and for anyone looking to play in this space. Is not, let's talk about autonomous drones. It's more, let's talk about how in in factory line, we can move to more effective asset tracking or inventory management, which are use cases that manufacturing plants already have and are looking to deploy, but want to be able to do more effectively. And so that's a kind of gradual step change. And what we then get into the idea of is 5G not to deploy specific point solutions and killer apps, but actually becomes that platform narrative where I'm future-proofing your business by giving you 5G services for this use case, but with the notion that you can now add on other use cases as they start to develop and as this more strategic and long-term and innovative and more sci-fi type use cases come about. And so I think that's probably the way that I would look at it. And in fact, from that survey, we found that the majority of enterprises are looking at 5G to improve their existing processes and applications rather than enabling a new suite of completely new applications or in other regards, looking at other applications. So I think from my perspective, it would be looking at use cases or processes that organizations already do and already have that rely on connectivity that you can improve and make better and improve the quality of service. And I think a great example, especially over the COVID pandemic, is virtual consultations, because I've got a family of doctors and they all have been using Skype conversations for years, but the quality is often poor and you get drop-off rates, and you can't use them for certain processes or certain consultations because you don't have the quality of video. The idea that 5G on a wide area can add mobility to that, I think is really important, and just improve a process that they already have. So I think those are the quick wins. It's transform what enterprises are already doing, and then it's let's talk about the greenfield, and we've now future-proofed your business. Let's talk about what's next. So I think those may be the quick wins, and potentially looking in spaces like retail where they're already trying to transform those models to become more decentralized will hold good opportunities as well.
Okay, I've got a couple of questions, a couple of minutes left, so I'm just going to quickly get a question to you, Ron. This relates back to one of your points about my move to public cloud. The question is, do you really see CSPs pushing or moving BSS to public cloud? This is non-trivial. And do you have any examples?
Yeah, so again, everyone is exploring, looking in that direction. Obviously, this varies greatly from operator to operator and from region to region, and some have regulatory issues, but all of them are looking to migrate BSS and OSS systems as much as they can to the public cloud, cooperating with the public cloud vendors. Like I mentioned before, it depends which systems you want. It depends what assets you already have. So this is really why this hybrid approach that we are talking about is crucial, both to enable the smooth transition and also to enable you to maintain the ongoing operations, combining the private and public cloud. We have quite a number actually of operators that have practically with AWS and with Azure and with GCP, very large vendor operator in Central Europe, which we have migrating in his entire BSS to AWS, working with North American operators on Azure. And again, each one of them has a slightly different approach, but again, doing this migration and leveraging the benefits of the cloud native solutions to enable this transition. And again, getting the whole benefits that we know from the cloud, right? Reduce TCO and enhance additional services that we can have to maintain that. So for sure, this is a trend we're seeing very strong in the industry.
So we've come to the end of the hour, and look, I've got loads of good questions here, no time to serve them, but don't worry, those of you who have taken the time and trouble to submit your questions, thank you. We will get back to you in the next, I'd say 10 days with responses, so you are not forgotten. And thank you for all of you for submitting your questions. Thank you, Darius and Ron, for taking those questions, but also presenting your insights. And of course, thank you, Amdocs, for sponsoring this webinar. Thanks, everyone, and have a good day.
Thanks a lot, Phil.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.